If you're interested in becoming wealthy through property, these 5 things are 100% critical to catapulting your success. In my opinion, you are frankly mad to dismiss these things, and to pre-warn you, these 5 things aren't sexy. They are simple, realistic things that if you think about and do consistently over a decade, will make you more money without doubt. Now, what I can't do is predict how much more money you'll make, because I can't predict your income, I can't predict the multitude of different things that can happen in our lives for the better or worse. But I know for sure these 5 things are things that have helped me go from nothing to a multi-million-pound property portfolio and a property business that turns over £1 to £2 million a year. So let's get into it. Number 1 is you need a budget. You need to know each and every day, week and month what you're going to spend and why. Every pound you possess is an asset that you can spend to consume things or invest to make you even more money in the future. And you need to treat it with that level of respect. It's such a basic thing that so many people just don't do. Think about it for a moment. If you run a business, you will have accounts you keep an eye on, you keep track of, what you're spending, what you're making, to then work out your profit at the end of each week or month. The whole focus of a business is to make sure it is profitable and that you are trying to make things as efficient as possible to maximize your business's success. But yet, we often don't treat our personal finances in this way. If you're sat there and you don't know how much you've spent on takeaways last month, or how much you've spent on travel or your food shop or housing, you need to start doing this. The second thing is you need to watch your debt. I've deliberately said watch your debt rather than get out of debt. And the reason for this is with property and investing, debt is a bit of a delicate subject. You realistically can't build real wealth from property from nothing. You need money from somewhere. And for most people, that is raising debt. For others, it might be borrowing it from family or friends, or borrowing it from investors at an interest rate, or even going about things in a joint venture with an investor. But no matter how you cut it, you need money from somewhere, and that is going to cost you in some way. The most important thing is to look at debt as a risk and to make sure that risk is worth carrying. You need to be confident that the debt you are taking is creating more value than it is costing you. Any debt you take on has to make more money than it's costing you at the end of the day. So for example, you buy a buy-to-let property, the debt costs you £500 per month, but the property makes you £800 a month. That debt is making you £300 a month that you can then use to pay off debt, invest in something else, or use it to live your best life. This is a far better use of debt than buying a car with debt that costs you £300 a month that isn't making you anything. Rather than buying that car, focus on using that same debt to buy an investment that pays for the car. Think about running your whole life in that way. Now, I do think there is an exception to the rule when I think it's a good idea to start focusing on paying down debt that is making you money. And that exception is when you reach a point where you are earning beyond what you need. Basically, I don't think it's a good idea to risk what you need for what you don't need. So when you reach that point where you can use money to make more money you don't really need, instead use that money to pay off debt. Pay off debt because paying off that debt is reducing your risk. And why risk what you need for what you don't need? For me, I'm actually really focused at the moment on paying off the mortgage on my home, which I'm not far off doing now. It'll probably take me a few more years. Even though I know I could use that money to make more money or buy a bigger house using more debt, for me, I don't really need more space, so what's the point? The third thing is live on less than what you make. If you spend everything you make, in my mind, that is just dangerous. Now, I appreciate there are a lot of people out there that need to, simply to survive, and I'm in no way suggesting someone magically live on less when they just can't. But this is why it is so important to follow the first point I shared, which is to keep a budget. If you look at your budget and you're spending money on things you don't truly need, then you should be saving that money instead to invest or pay off debt. In my experience, when people start tracking what they're spending and make budgets, they organically start spending less because you start to notice, to better realize where you're wasting, money on silly things. Common traps that people fall into is buying a coffee every day, for instance. There are 260 working days a year, roughly. So if you spend £5 a working day on coffees, that would total £1,300 a year. And there are loads of these little money traps, whether it's, buying takeaways more than you should, unused subscriptions, literally loads of things. You need to shift your mindset away from buying things because you can afford it to buying things because you need them. That way you're buying things that create value in your life and you're saving those pounds that don't to invest in something that makes you more money in the future. The fourth thing is to build a buffer or safety net. Now, I know this isn't very sexy advice, and I know we all naturally live life not wanting to think about the worst case scenarios or the worst things that can happen, but it is really important to have that buffer of cash, an amount of savings you can draw on if something goes wrong. None of us can predict the future. To foresee COVID, to foresee the war in Ukraine, a war in Europe, and there will be loads of other things that will happen in the future that might affect what you earn or need to spend, that you need a buffer in place just in case. I personally think it is having 6 months or ideally a year of your fixed costs saved in cash, so that if something happens and your income is affected or you have some unforeseen cost, you've got that breathing space to not panic, to deal with whatever the issue is without the short-term panic of running out of money. It might feel like a waste of money having cash sat there, but treat it as an insurance policy so that if anything does happen, it can potentially pay for itself many times over. So with my businesses, I always make sure I've got at least 6 months of cash reserves in place for this exact reason. And in my personal finances, at least 12 months, all accessible as cash. Now, the fifth thing is to be generous. Now, this tip might surprise you as being generous is really a cost, but if you've got the other 4 tips nailed, you'll be surprised how much more personal peace and happiness you will have by being generous to those around you, rather than buying that extra coffee or buying that bigger house you don't need or that more expensive car. Focus on seeking happiness beyond those material things. I know there will be a lot of you out there that will be thinking, I'm talking nonsense. And when I started out trying to make money, I honestly thought it was all about those material things. But what you start to realize as you get those things you thought you wanted is they give you quite short-lived satisfaction. The things that give lasting satisfaction are the family and friends around you, the experiences you have with those important people in your life. If being successful in property is important to you, check out my other videos.